Hey there everybody, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, and just wrapped up this week's Evolutionary Herbalism student Q&A session, and had a really great question about two remedies that are very specific for the heart and addressing the heart in ways that I think from a clinical herbalism perspective, maybe we don't tend to think of when we're treating the heart. Oftentimes we think of high blood pressure or predispositions for heart disease and things like that when we consider herbs that work on the heart. But there's this whole other level of working with the heart for the herbalists out there that really want to use plants not just for helping the body, but helping the whole person, helping our psychology, helping our emotions, even helping ourselves and other people spiritually with plants. And to me, the heart is one of the most important places to focus on in regards to working with especially psychological and emotional dynamics in our life. So for this week's post, I wanted to share with you some of my answer to a question about two of my favorite cardiac remedies. So I hope you enjoy this week's Q&A session. Question number one here is coming to us from Layla Habib, who is in Materia Medica Monthly. And she is asking, I'm wondering if motherwort would pair well with rose, specifically Rosa rugosa. Thanks so much for the question, Layla. And I really wanted to share this question and answer here in the video format for our Q&A here because I feel like this is it's a really great question because it's a question in regards to the heart, and I feel like this is a really fitting pair of herbs in regards to what's going on in the world right now and with all of the things that are being brought up culturally, specifically in the United States right now, with all of the really deeply entrenched conditionings that are being brought to the surface right now in regards to racism and discrimination and cultural trauma, individual trauma. And to me, these things that are being brought up really show a need for healing in our hearts. And these two herbs are such incredibly powerful remedies for the heart that I thought it would be a nice pair to talk about. So when we're looking at motherwort or Leonurus cardiaca, this is in the mint family. It's one of our very bitter mint plants that is a unique remedy in that it is what I would refer to as one of our very bitter nervines. We see this in the mint family where we've got a lot of aromatic plants that are very carminative, and we also have a lot of bitter plants that are very distinctly sedative for the nervous system. And motherwort is in that latter category. And one of the things that I've found with nervines in general is that while, yes, for the most part, they all tend to calm and sedate and relax the nervous system, what we see in nervous system, just anatomy and physiology, is that there are distinct areas of the body where we see a very large concentration of neural tissue. And some herbs will tend to have a little bit more of an orientation for those nerve centers. And the main ones that I tend to think of the most, kind of big picture categories, would be kind of the brain, the heart, and the gut. And motherwort is one of those remedies that has a very strong affinity for the heart, as I like to call these cardiac nervines. These are remedies that are really excellent for people that feel nervous and anxious. They have what we might refer to as more of a vata imbalance from the Ayurvedic perspective, or according to physiomedicalism, more of a wind tension kind of tissue state. Cramping and nervousness and anxiety and kind of a high-strung nervous system. but they tend to feel it more in their chest. So when they get nervous or anxious, it's not like a mental stress, mind racing kind of thing, or it's not like they get really nauseous, or maybe some people get really nervous and anxious and they really want to eat a lot of food, or they lose their appetite and don't eat anything. These are the people where they get it, they feel it in their chest. They get heart palpitations or heart flutters. Sometimes they can get kind of sweaty palms. And that nervousness is just, they feel it in their chest, sometimes a tightness, sometimes a fluttering. This is really where both motherwort and rose are incredible plants. The rose specifically here oftentimes is thought of as, a very basic antioxidant herb, a cooling sour remedy to cool heat in the blood, inflammation, tonifying the blood vessels. But I find that rose, specifically flowers, have a really nice, gentle nervine effect. And I think this is really true for any type of medicinal plant that is going to have an affinity for the heart. And this is because a lot of nervousness and anxiety and things like that oftentimes is due to kind of this mental excess, psychological excess, thinking too much, or a high-strung nervous system. And one thing that we see is that as soon as our perceptual faculties move from the head or the mind down into the heart, we see a distinct shift in the functioning of the nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system becomes more active, and we see that people just in general tend to become significantly more calm and relaxed and centered and collected. And I think that's a really powerful way in which that we see the roses working. And I know that's not something that is typically talked about in regards to rose, but that's something that I've really noticed over the years of working with this plant. This is something that my wife Whitney has really noticed. She has worked with this plant a lot. And we really have noticed that people, even just taking rose all by itself, tend to kind of come to a little bit more of an even keel in terms of their levels of worry and nervousness and anxiety, and through just coming more directly into the heart. And so this is where I really see motherwort and rose pairing very well together for people that have that vata imbalance, that need to be calmed and relaxed, but also just need to come more into the heart. And innately in that process of entering more into a heart orientation of perception, we see that this really is where we start to see changes in the emotional side of things. I think this is where a lot of emotional healing happens. I think we all have things in our heart that need to be attended to, right? I believe as human beings, we all go through some form of trauma in our lives. And I think there's varying degrees of that trauma, but as we are children and very open and very sensitive, I think regardless of who we are or where we come from, we all experience things that affect our hearts, whether that's getting made fun of on the playground, or maybe that's being rejected by someone that you're interested in, or whether that is physical abuse and violence, whether that is sexual abuse and violence, whether there's a whole spectrum of trauma that we can experience as humans. And the heart, I believe, and what I have seen through experience, is the heart really oftentimes becomes very strongly affected by that. And these types of traumas can directly set up kind of our emotional patterning that we experience throughout our lives. And so remedies like motherwort and rose, through the way in which they penetrate into our hearts, not just on a physical level, but also on more of a subtle emotional level, can help us to move through those traumas, help us to understand how those traumas can be our teachings, how they can become our transformation. And it's really through this shifting in our orientation of taking our trauma and turning it around, right? Turning it into our strength, turning it into our gift, turning it into something that is our unique gift and our unique perspective and our unique orientation that we can then help someone else with. And this is something that we have worked with a lot, my wife Whitney and I, and a lot of evolutionary herbalism students, right? It's really central to this whole model of herbal medicine, right? Is working with plants to heal these deeper levels within us, not just, thinking of plants as chemical constituents that bind to receptors in our body and have physical effects, but that they have this deeper level of healing that they can provide for us. And, one of my teachers always says, if you're not really quite sure where to start with someone, start with the heart. You really can't go wrong. We all have healing that we need to do in our hearts. And I think collectively, with what's going on in the world right now, I think it's very clear that there is a lot of healing that we all have to do within our hearts on both ends of this equation, right? From, the people that have been oppressed and have experienced discrimination and racism and all the trauma that comes from that. There's so much that can be helped through plants like this, right? Through just the way that they help to heal our emotional and spiritual heart. And on the other side of it, right, to the people that do discriminate, the people that are racist, the people that are committing these atrocious acts of violence, and whether that's physical violence or other forms of violence. To me, it's a clear indication to me that these people have a wound in their heart, and they have a sickness in their mind, an imbalance within the mind that sees another human being as less than themselves. And that's not right. That's not healthy. That's actually antithetical to the way the rest of nature works. It's a deviation from the natural order of things, and it is something that needs healing. And I think the heart is a really important place for healing to occur there as well, because if someone is a racist and discriminating another human being because of race or skin color or religious belief or gender identity or any of the number of reasons that people discriminate another fellow human being, it shows that there is a lack of connection to their own heart, because there's a lack of compassion, there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of being able to see someone in their humanity. And these are all qualities that healing the heart can help these types of things. So I'm not trying to deviate too much from your question here, Layla, but this has been pretty top of mind for me over the last few weeks, and just what's going on in the world right now. And it really, to me, all points back to the heart and the need for us to heal our hearts. And the motherwort and rose are two really incredible remedies that can support in the healing of the heart in this way. So the one thing that I would note here with these two herbs, kind of shifting back into our herbalist orientation here of these plants, both of these plants are cooling. So motherwort is very bitter and cooling. Rose is kind of sour and a bit more mildly cooling than motherwort, but cooling nonetheless. And so this is something that if someone's going to be working with these plants over a long-term period of time, That's something to be aware of for people that maybe have colder constitutions. Sometimes adding something gentle in there to warm it up a little bit can be a good approach. And both will have a nice relaxant property, but not to the point that you're feeling tired or sleepy or anything like that. These are remedies that can be used throughout the day safely without inducing a deep level of tiredness and things like that. So great question, Layla, on motherwort and rose. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time to express a little bit of what those plants kind of made me think of in the way that they can really be powerful healers for our heart. And I think these are the kinds of plants that are very applicable for our current times.